Pain point number 3. So this is about communication. Lack of clarity in communication leads to mistrust and then resistance to change. So people don't know, they start making up stories. You've got inconsistent communication that creates that confusion. Sadly, that's what's coming from, DC is inconsistent communication. And so because there are some changes they made and then they came back and did something different. They laid people off and then they brought them back. And what does that do to a human being when they're like, okay, well then, okay, now I have to work with these people. I gotta, walk on eggshells because I don't know when it's going to come around again too. So as leaders, but it really is about making sure that you're communicating well. And leaders hesitate to be honest about the challenges. So sometimes leaders sugarcoat the realities to really avoid panic. And sometimes they stay silent because they're still frozen, they're in fear, and they're not sure what to do. But it leaves employees to fill in the gaps with worst case scenarios or gossip, which actually takes up time. And I'll call them the water cooler conversations, but that happens as well too.
Chris,
And then
what
yes,
I find interesting to that point, right, is because the leaders hesitate to be honest, right? And I've experienced that in a few different organizations I've been in. And I feel like it's weird because leaders tend to forget that they're working with other professionals, right? We're all professionals, right?
right,
And as long as you're communicating with professionals and providing them information, even when it's bad, right? Like it allows them, a professional, to plan and adjust and pivot in so many different ways because we all have so many tools in our tool belt, right? And I think we just lose sight that it's just always communicating. Even if it's like, hey, I have no update, I haven't received anything, right? You're providing them something, and something is better than nothing.
right, right. Yeah, thanks, Anthony. That's true. And so communicate often is what I always say too. Even if it's daily updates. I know there was a lot of leaders I worked with during the pandemic, and it was like literally daily they had to share what was actually happening. And I think that taught us a little bit more about, challenges, but this is all trauma. And so when you think about, big trauma, little trauma, it's all trauma for us. So, and what happens with that too. And unfortunately, some of us can get numb to that trauma as well. Solutions, number 3 to those challenges is there you go, Anthony. Be transparent about what's known and what's unknown. See, you already knew. And so instead of focusing on that uncertainty, leaders can paint a vision of of the possibility, instilling that hope and moving forward and really listening to what people your team might actually have some suggestions that you never thought of. But, having that creative space, if you can, find out what's actually happening with the fear and with each individual person by listening to them, that allows them to have their brain process differently too. So, but they don't need specifically everything that's certain, but it's about being honest, and I think makes a big difference.
What I was going to say about that is that sometimes when you're transparent with employees, sometimes they fill up the gaps. They fill in the gaps because sometimes they're also connected. We're all connected. So I may not know all the specifics, but maybe they have a relative that works in HR, a relative that works in a different department, and they kind of already heard. And sometimes they're giving me some information that I wasn't privy to because they kind of in the know.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
and then they know you're being honest.
right. Well, that's important because that builds trust. For you to be able to share with them builds that trust. And you're right, you may not know everything, but they may help you learn a little bit more too. So it's listening to what they've got to say too. But that clear, consistent messaging across all leadership levels to make sure it's the same. Because you might, you know, directors might have a message, but if your mid-level managers don't share that exact same message, then what's coming to the front line may be completely different. And so, perhaps you're in a leadership meeting and this is what the information is. Just make sure everybody's really clear about how they share what that might be, what that message is. And then replacing fear-based leadership with future-focused leadership, because you know, these challenges are here, they're present, they may not happen and be consistent for a long period of time, or they might, but it's really speaking with the confidence and inspire what is possible to give teams clear action steps to move forward. So that future focus can at least help them see that.